The Lisbon Treaty, yes or no? The government suggested this week that a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty could be held as early as June. It also reiterated that if Ireland were to sign up to the treaty, it would not be required to join any European defence force. Coleman reports what the treaty means for Ireland.
Ireland.
The Lisbon Treaty gets Irish signatures of approval in Portugal. Its stated aim is to enhance the efficiency and democratic legitimacy of the Union. It amends current EU treaties. Debates on Lisbon are already taking place around the country. What do you think the Lisbon Treaty is about?
As far as I know, it's about trying to kind of change the EU so that it can work better for 27 members instead of 15.
Well, I don't really know much about it, to be honest, and that's why I'm here tonight.
The Lisbon Treaty is it's mostly about privatisation. I think the thing I feel most strongly about is the fact that Dermot Ahern said recently that you can't be a pro-European and vote no on the Lisbon Treaty, and that's that's an appalling thing to say.
EU treaties can be complicated and dull, but they do matter. Take the Nice Treaty, which brought 10 new members into the EU. As a result, we have Polish shops like this one, newspapers and broadcast programmes in different languages, and tens of thousands of Eastern Europeans living and working here. Now we're being asked to vote on the Lisbon Treaty. But what exactly is it all about? When the Treaty of Rome was signed in 1957, there were only 6 members in Europe's elite club. The entry of Ireland, Britain and Denmark in 1973 was a manageable expansion. Succeeding enlargements over the years added a bit more of a load, but the membership of 10 states in 2004 and 2 more in 2007 put considerable pressure on existing EU institutions, which were in danger of buckling under the pressure. A change was needed to make them more efficient and manageable. The creation of the EU Constitution in 2004 was supposed to tackle those inefficiencies, but its rejection by the Dutch and French meant it was given the boot. Controversial aspects of the Constitution, such as an EU flag and anthem, were dropped, and the EU Reform Treaty, commonly known as the Lisbon Treaty, was created.
The Lisbon Reform Treaty is aimed at, first of all, bringing the institutions of the European Union up to date. They were invented for 6 member states. We now have 27, and it's a much more complex world than that was. Secondly, the idea was to try and address the democratic deficit. So the treaty, for example, it will make Europe more democratic.
The Lisbon Treaty will introduce changes to certain aspects of the EU. For example, it paves the way for a president of the European Council. There'll be a high representative for foreign affairs and security policy. Another major change centres on the voting system for the Council of Ministers. Qualified majority voting will become the norm under the Lisbon Treaty. Other changes include a reduction in the number of commissioners. There'll be a capping of members of the European Parliament. Ireland will lose 1 MEP. And a charter of fundamental rights will be created. Campaigning for and against the treaty has already started, with those against coming from all camps.
I'm against the Lisbon Treaty because it contains a number of articles which promotes free and undistorted competition as the main value of Europe.
Ironically, another organisation campaigning for a no vote argues the opposite economic point, saying the treaty will shore up state-owned monopolies and stifle competition.
It's going to allow for the protection of incumbent national champions, as Nicolas Sarkozy calls some of these companies that he wants to protect, like Total Alfina. This isn't going to create innovation, inventiveness and entrepreneurship, those skills that we need to cure these ills. It's just going to bolster the barriers to progress.
Libertas is a new organisation that's calling for a no vote. Its founder believes the Lisbon Treaty will erode Ireland's influence in Brussels.
It massively reduces Ireland's influence in the European Union. Our voting weight in this treaty would be reduced by 55%. It's more than halved. Germany's is increased by 110%, more than doubles. France's is increased by 80%. It almost doubles. We are giving up an enormous amount of control over our own affairs, and we get nothing in return.
For somebody to suggest our influence is reduced, it's quite the opposite. I really don't understand. If people read the detail of the Lisbon Treaty, it is very clear. The new qualified majority voting rules, let's be realistic, they don't come into effect till 2014 at the earliest. But that new system is much more beneficial to smaller countries.
Another thorny issue is defence. The treaty updates and expands peacekeeping and military tasks allowed under the EU's common security and defence policy. Those against Lisbon say this will further militarise the EU.
It gives a legal base to battle groups. It gives support to the European Defence Agency, which has just been set up to promote extra military spending in Europe.
But the government insists Irish neutrality will not be affected by any defence or security changes.
When the Irish people voted in the last Nice referendum, they put an absolute control on the issue in our constitution. So the citizens of Ireland are the protectors of our neutrality. No government and no Dáil can ever agree in Ireland to become part of a defence arrangement without specifically going back to the people and getting their permission.
Meanwhile, at Trinity College, a debate on Lisbon reflects polarising views.
I must admit whether I am anti or pro-Europe. What on earth? All in the battle groups. What on earth is that supposed to mean? Does it mean I hate the Swiss Alps and I wouldn't walk down the Champs-Élysées? What does it mean?
The complexities of the Lisbon Treaty mean it will be a huge challenge to explain it in a simple, uncomplicated way. There's a real danger it will be oversimplified, or worse still, distorted to push a pro or anti stance. And we may never really understand what it all means.